long-term effects of confined animal feeding operations, and environmental impacts.
What does a confined animal feeding operation look like? The image on the left shows 3 cows sitting in mud and manure. They appear extremely unhealthy as they're covered in their own feces. This is a common situation in most confined animal feeding operations, and there hasn't been much improvement over the years. The milk industry has been feeding us misinformation for decades. The poster on the right shows cows in an open field with a vibrant black and white coat. As you can tell, the advertisement and reality of how cows are treated are along 2 very different realities. Are you feeling deceived yet?
Confined animal feeding operations. Many of the problems with CAFOs or mega farms have been brought to the spotlight within the media because of the large, well-known corporate brands such as Tyson Foods and Eggland's Best that control them. CAFOs have a negative impact on public health, the environment, and the quality of life for those living near them. Unethical in almost every way, confined animal feeding operations are wreaking havoc on not only the environment but public health. Common environmental impacts. One of the main problems of CAFOs is the trillions of pounds of waste produced by animals that end up as runoff into the rivers, killing fish and contaminating drinking water. This occurs when urine and feces are mixed with water in ponds that can leak into the surrounding groundwater systems that lead to this water contamination. The amount of grain grown to feed the livestock alone is impacting the nutrients in the soil. Depletion of these nutrients and over-fertilization impact the environment because the soil becomes barren and useless. With so many animals in such a small, confined space, the waste is also degrading the air quality. Liquefied waste produces over 100 known gases, including the deadly gas hydrogen sulfide. Common health impacts. You are what you eat is a substantially important saying when talking about CAFOs. Much of the livestock that lives on these farms are fed diets that are not actually good for the animals. Along with this, antibiotics are overused and can create super bugs and super bacteria. As antibiotics are used more and more, the bugs and bacteria become resistant and take on new forms. This can cause serious health issues not only in the animal, but in humans when they reach the human population. Those that work as meat packers and on the CAFOs are more likely to be exposed. However, an outbreak of salmonella within the rest of the population has occurred, with illness and even death making the headlines.
Possible solutions to safely operating CAFOs. Although CAFOs are legally acceptable, as humans we need to evaluate our economic decisions and consider how animals we consume are treated. Some solutions are increasing regulations that will cause CAFOs to operate within stricter limits, increasing public outcry about common CAFO practices such as abuse and overpopulation, and finally passing additional legislation through both the federal and state governments that will enforce the CAFOs to comply with laws. The first solution is to increase regulations for CAFOs. Increasing CAFO regulations that clearly state and explain how a CAFO is supposed to operate will indicate what they are allowed and not allowed to do. Once these federal and state regulations are in place, then CAFOs need to be held accountable if they violate them, whether this is criminal prosecution or civil prosecution. There need to be tangible consequences for these violations. Although these regulations and enforcement of them make sense, regulations under certain governmental administrations have not always been in place or enforced. A specific example of the lack of regulations and enforcement of existing regulations occurred during the Bush administration. These regulations were greatly relaxed, allowing agribusiness to flourish even as the operations hurt the animals, public health, and ultimately the environment around the CAFO itself.
Although increasing regulations can be effective, increasing public awareness on CAFOs will put a stop to what they want to do. Increasing public pressure on CAFOs will make them unable to do what they want without any backlash or consequences. CAFOs must listen to the public because the people are the ones buying their products. If the public demands that the CAFOs no longer treat animals cruelly and live up to their ethical and environmental responsibilities, then it is likely that the CAFOs will change their business practices. With that said, however, if they do not, more drastic measures must be taken. For example, boycotting CAFOs and not purchasing their products. With the boycotting, CAFOs will soon realize that they will no longer stay in business without the public's support. The public can intentionally stop purchasing their products. A large reason the facilities can stay in business the way they run the business is because they know that they are not held legally accountable for their actions. In addition, these CAFOs will try to buy politicians through campaign donations and influence the media like they already have done. But this buying or influence will not benefit too much if the public remains vigilant and seeks out the available information. With the people's help, CAFOs will not be able to operate in complete secrecy. The public must exercise their collective voice so they can control the system and not reverse it.
It's a time for action. We can only sustain this type of farming for a limited period. These farming practices will degrade the quality of our food and the environment around us. The air quality, which will be damaged by the 100 known gases that are emitted from CAFOs, the drinking water, which will essentially become toxic with all the urine, feces, and chemical runoff from these factories. The environmental and health cost will exceed the benefits these operations produce. The hospitalization costs of people in the area and the people working in the CAFOs will go up, which will impact the region's budget and finances for years to come. The property values of homes in the area of which a CAFO operates will also decrease, which will ultimately leave a deficit for the schools and the local governments because the taxes that they collect will also go down. The welfare of these animals is in our best interest. The better they are treated, the less likely they can contract diseases and pass them on to you. The final decision lays with you, the consumer, the person who has the economic power to stop these CFOs and go back to a more traditional form of agribusiness.